see that Mr. Dunn drinks Diet Coke in the morning like me. So there we go. Got that in common.
Better than the alternative, I'll tell you. So, Steve?
Yes.
Hey, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. As Royce noted, Steve Heitman. I'm the new fire chief of the Renton Regional Fire Authority. Just a little bit, I was the fire chief for the city of Mercer Island for the last 6 years, their deputy chief for 7 years prior to that, and started with the organization 20 years ago. So I'm happy and excited to be here and be a part of this. So looking forward to meeting and working with all of you.
Great. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
It's a great group of folks down there. Well respected in the community.
And by the way, I'm a coffee drinker, so.
Oh, there you go.
I do drink Diet Coke, but different time of the day.
That's right.
I'll go. I'm Carrie Shaw, and I'm the Executive Director of Renton Technical College Foundation, and know Councilmember Dunn many years back. Yes, and I'm registering as a coffee drinker. Let's hear it for the coffee drinkers.
Nice to see you. Marvin, good morning. How are you, sir?
Oh, there we go. Good morning, fine sir. I'm Marvin Rossetti. I'm up here in the Renton Highlands, and officially I do a little bit of political consulting. But for today, I'm working on being Dr. Marvin. For purposes of disclosure, I was an intern back for King County Council, and I hung out in Councilmember Dunn's office, being a rabble rouser.
I remember.
Actually, the last time we talked about this last month, but the last time I was actually at King County Council was working with Larry Phillips, and we were working on redistricting. So 10 years later, voila, we're going to be talking about that later on again. But for fun to let Reagan know what I'm doing on, I'm also working on being Dr. Marvin. I'm over at the University of Southern California right now and finishing up my doctorate program. So
good for you. What are you working on?
Oh, it's in education.
Good
totally. We'll get coffee. We'll talk about the whole thing.
Yeah, I'd love to. Educational doctorate. That's cool. Good for you.
Oh, it's a great program.
I'm glad to see you. I was glad to see you pop up. I'm glad you're doing well. Yeah. It's funny how after 30, the years go in 5, right? Isn't that true? All of a sudden, it's boom, 35, 40, 45,
Yeah,
Yeah,
like, no, I stopped counting. Stop counting.
Oh, good. Thanks, Marlon. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
And the other Renton Chamber is a computer setup with the PowerPoint if necessary. And then Cody, I'm not going to go without introduction, as I feel the backbone of any individual in an elected office is sometimes overlooked, but often the most important part of the process.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. I'm Cody Eccles. I'm Reagan Dunn's chief of staff, and and I'm also a coffee drinker. Appreciate having you all on here. Carrie, I remember working with you down in Olympia when you were communications director.
Oh, wow. Good memory. That's that 5 year, the 5 years. Like, oh, that was 5 years ago.
It's been a while. Right.
No, I'm glad. Cody's been with me a little over maybe a year and a half now. And he was kind of a first round draft pick. Cody he's a lawyer. He also happens to have his MBA and LLM, which is a master's in tax law from the University of Washington. So he's smart and a good guy to work with, and it's been a great asset to our term and serving the residents of the 9th Council District.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn.
Oh, and I listened to him. I hire good people and I listen to them. It's a novel leadership tactic.
It's a sign of a good leader. Listen to your
Sounds like a
people.
great idea to me.
And as I look around in my position at the chamber, at the individuals in this room, I echo those sentiments of surrounding yourself with people that are smarter than you. So
Yeah.
thank you to everyone for being here. And Councilmember Dunn, I, without any further ado, would love to hear from you.
Great. Well, my pleasure. Let's get that PowerPoint loaded up if we can. It's been my privilege to represent the citizens of the 9th Council District. It's just over 250,000 people in my district, and it includes parts of 9 cities and about half of the city of Renton, and about 70,000 unincorporated area residents. They don't have city councils or mayors out there. The local government is their one elected council member, and then some of the specialized offices as well. So we'll go to the PowerPoint. Since this is particularly focused on transportation and legislation, let me just run through this PowerPoint and then field questions, comments, concerns. I think probably fair to talk a little bit about the Red Lion and where that is going. And we'll just go from there. It's informal today. So let's move to the first slide if we could. Who's controlling? Is that me or somebody else? There we go. Okay. This obviously, I mean, what can I say? I mean, you know, a pandemic hit, and as my staff knows, I've been worried about a pandemic for years, and we have there were many times where I called on the county government to do more in preparation for a pandemic. It happened, and even with some of those warnings, we were still not where we needed to be. In fact, no government across the United States or indeed the world was truly prepared for what has hit us. It has dogged us, and it's been worse than we have, I think, imagined pretty much all the way through. But the good news, obviously, is that several different vaccines have been discovered and are in mass production throughout the world. And we are now in the process of, I think, wartime efforts equivalents beginning now to ramp up. And so the goal in that vaccine distribution process is to vaccinate 70% or more of all adults, certainly all adults who want to be vaccinated, ultimately are going to be vaccinated. And so the adult population of 1.8 million in King County, it's about 2.4, 2.45 for the entire county's population. Adult 1.8, so that's about 1.26 million if you do the math. And that's no small amount of people. That's a large group of people for any local government to manage. And ultimately, we'll do a vaccine for folks under age 16 when they become available. And so that population number will increase. As of the 12th, so this is pretty fresh, as Friday, 351,000 doses of vaccine have been administered throughout the county, of which 266 and change have received 1 dose, and 85,000 of the lucky ones who have been fully vaccinated with 2 doses so far. 47% of eligible residents in that 1A, B1 have received their first dose of the vaccine. Close to 70% of licensed healthcare workers, and 40% of 75 and older, and 100% of residents residing in quote unquote assisted living facilities. And the fire guys might help me update. I was fortunate to go along with the Kent Regional Fire Authority and do some vaccinations in the city of Kent as we moved around. And I found it to be very interesting. You'll see here that picture, just go back one real quick, sorry, is Mayor Dana Ralph of Kent, plus Dow Constantine, Dave Updegrove, who has the other half of Renton, and myself at Show where we opened the mass vaccination site. Okay, next slide, thanks. So still more, that's a picture of us going around to the various assisted living facilities throughout the county. And I think the most significant challenge is facing that that supply issues of the vaccine from the state and federal government. You know, I will be very candid with you. I don't think the federal government was anywhere near prepared or working hard enough over the past 12 months to get ready to do the vaccine distribution chain of supply process. And it's just beginning now, I think, to get to where it needs to be at full throttle. So going through the state, those vaccines were distributed at the state level. And at first, the county was only initially getting about 23% of the state's vaccine allocation, even though we're about 30% of the population. And we did call on the state to increase the vaccine allocation. They have responded a good bit to that request. And the arguments are, you know, that we have the public health infrastructure that is bigger, more capable, and we have the public-private partnerships that allow us to amplify better than some of these other more rural counties. And I think that is very much true, given all of the various providers we have, including right down there at Valley Medical Center and other places. We're also working with regional chambers of commerce, Challenge Seattle, other business and labor groups to push more vaccine as that supply increases. There's some contact information for you if you want more information on vaccinations. And I know we're beginning to get that mess of information sorted out. It certainly didn't roll out perfectly. I think we could have done a much better job had the federal government taken a leadership role on this, put together a toolkit and best practices over the past 12 months. They didn't do that. So we are inventing as we are on the fly right now. Next slide, please. Shifting gears over to the finance side of this whole pandemic is the federal COVID relief package. As you know, there were multiple federal stimulus bills, for lack of a better term. And we've got another one coming down, the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package that President Biden is moving forward. It should be the long and short of it, the bottom of this slide is King County's estimate is around $440 million. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets winnowed down to something like $350 million, but in that ballpark range, which is about the same as the last full COVID package that came through. That's real money. I just want, you know, you're talking close to $500 million. That's real money for King County. And Seattle should have its own separate appropriation as well. And so my job will be to encourage the state and also the county to filter down those funds as quickly as possible to organizations that need them, including, for example, the RFA. And we want to do that as quickly as we can and not get in the way. I don't want to see the legislative branch at any level, whether it's Congress right now or the state or the county council, delay. Let's move quickly. We'll get the dollars out and then let these local units of government, special purpose districts, nonprofits, and public-private partnerships do the hard work where the rubber meets the road of actually getting the jabs into people's arms or providing housing or providing the various safety nets that we need to as a result of this. So funds are going to be available until expended, which is good because the last supplemental appropriation had December 31st as a cutoff date, which messed everything up. This is a little different. We can replace lost, delayed, or decreased revenue. That didn't happen last time. That's very significant as you think of what revenue may have been lost as a result of, for example, decrease in sales tax revenue. There's about $65 billion across the nation, a big chunk for community block grant formulas as well. And you can see the state will get about $6.725 billion. So we have over 300 million people, and the whole appropriation, the local COVID is about 350 billion. So roughly $1 billion for every million people in the United States. And that's why that number is so close to what we're seeing at the state level. So big chunk. And if you want to know my position on this issue, I think Congress should pass it and just pass it through right now. And here's why. we have made a commitment to get people vaccinated throughout the country and try and keep us from falling off a cliff into depression level unemployment and debt and inflation. We are still very near the peak, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, of the pandemic. It doesn't make sense not to carry the strategy all the way through. And so in my judgment, we need to pass this 1.9 trillion. And as vaccinations continue to ramp up throughout the spring and summer, that stimulus will keep us afloat until about the time the economy reopens. After which, and I want to be clear to everyone on this call, the federal government will need to tighten its belt because we're going to have a massive debt. In fact, debt larger than the entire value of our economy, which is concerning on a whole bunch of downstream issues, which we can talk about in another forum. So next slide, please. FEMA reimbursements. President Biden directed FEMA to provide 100% federal reimbursement for all eligible COVID costs retroactively to the 20th of January 2020. FEMA has issued a statement indicating they will be developing procedures for this. A lot of significant reimbursement to King County, particularly relating to that early COVID response work, the shelters and the like. And we need certainly more guidance before we're able to count on this exactly. So it's still a very, very positive development. Next slide, please. So I serve on the King County budget leadership team for our COVID supplemental, which means all this federal dollars, we are determining how best to spend it. Obviously, the highest priority is the county's public health response. We are providing continued relief efforts in a variety of ways, food security and services, housing stability, as you know, childcare, workforce support, which we all know if you have kids running around, it's really been a challenge. Economic recovery, keeping small businesses afloat so they can keep their doors open, re-enter the economy when we're allowed to do so. Mental health, behavioral health, and substance abuse programs, that's an issue close to my heart and that we've been focusing on as well. And then just sort of the justice system and access to justice was just up the hill there in the Highlands. And we did 5,000 contribution to REACH in Renton. It's a great, great group for rental housing assistance. Doing our part to sort of ease the administrative burdens, to try and get this money out the door as quickly as we can, to remove those barriers to folks receiving the money. Next slide, please. Our budget shop is the one that is reconciling how that last year's COVID money was allocated and spent. There'll be a 6th emergency supplemental budget the council's going to focus on for federal aid coming up. Here's the timeline. February 18th, we're going to have it transmitted. So in our system, not unlike the mayor, the executive transmits the budget, then the budget is introduced and chewed up at the full county council. We have some budget briefings, and we take actions on a striking amendment. So we add those line items on programs that we want in the council. And let me pause for a moment here, and this is important, in Carrie and Steve and others. In this time, in this era, if you don't ask, you don't get. And there's so many things on my mind in the 9 cities that I had the privilege of representing and unincorporated, and also countywide, that sometimes I'm missing things. So please don't forget to just tap me on the shoulder, an email, let Cody know, let me know, call me, and let me know there is a program that is in need. It's program X, it does housing for whatever, or it's program Y that is a food bank, or it's program Z that is a supplemental organization that supports first responders efforts. Let me know that so I can help distribute some of these funds to those groups, because honestly, if it's not going to Renton, it's going to Shoreline or Vashon or Skycomish or any other place. And so it's just very important that people remember it's a little bit, it's a challenging thing to keep all these moving parts together. So I appreciate you helping me identify the priority sources as well. Next slide, please. I think there's one more. There we go. So the King County Regional Housing Authority and homelessness, it's not exactly on point with COVID, but it's another significant, one of the more significant issues facing us at the local level, homelessness. And the KCRHA was a group created by interlocal agreement between King County, the city of Seattle, and the suburban cities. Ed Prince is the Renton representative and one of the co-chairs, doing a fabulous job, I would say, on that. I was also a member until just this last week. I cycled off as the council does its annual reorganization of committee meetings, but we did a lot of good work in our scope, which is sort of shelter and rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing and other issues which I care about, like drug and alcohol addiction issues and mental health issues. And so we started really meeting in earnest in May, and leading to a confirmation just last week of a new CEO, Regina Cannon. And that CEO was something I put into the language of the interlocal agreement. We had an executive director with not as much power. Regina comes from Atlanta, Georgia, with a lot of very good experience. I think she's been seasoned appropriately for something of this import in our community, and she will be able to bring in top folks, including I think about 5 or so direct hires of her own when she arrives, which is useful. And she's a little bit insulated. I had a bug flying in front of my monitor. Sorry. I think that she's going to bring, a lot of weight to this job, which is very important. And I want to see her succeed. And it's also divorced from political influence in a way, because there is a board that it really is very difficult to hire and fire, really difficult to, for example, the city of Seattle sees something they don't like. There's a certain amount of resistance that they can have. And that's what we need. We need people to make the tough choices, sometimes the hard choices, sometimes the unpopular choices, if we are to get the homeless problem under control. Okay, next slide. So during last year's legislative session, authorization was passed on to the counties to allow for 1/10 of a cent for homelessness. It was given that if the local jurisdictions didn't utilize it, the county authority could utilize any untaxed capacity that the locals didn't move through. The county decided to seize, I think inappropriately, decided to seize on that provision and jam its authority through in about 2 weeks. And so a handful of cities, including Renton, ran very quickly to pass their own tax increase, about 1/10 of a cent. And so the county then passed its 1/10 of a cent, and so was not able to capture Renton's sales tax. And I was the only person to vote against the 1/10 of a cent sales tax increase at the county. And let me just clarify why that is. One, they weren't transparent, and they were jamming the other cities in a really somewhat underhanded way to try and get in front of them on the revenue that would be generated from their tax base in their municipality. That is one reason why I oppose it. The other is that what this is really going to do, unfortunately, is under the plan, it is partially going to be buying more hotels in the suburbs around Seattle, throughout King County, to put more hotels like the Red Lion. Okay, and what I've just said there is somewhat controversial. You don't have to all agree with it, but it's true. My own view on this is Seattle has promulgated failed policies in the area of homeless now for at least a decade. It has meant that Seattle has the highest homeless population per capita of any city in the United States, and they're going the wrong direction right now. And so what is happening is you have folks coming from other communities into Seattle, and then Seattle, through its various means, and King County, are exporting some of the homeless population to the suburbs. You are seeing that in real time in the red line. It's hard to sort of argue that somehow that's, I think, the right thing to do on your community partners outside of the city of Seattle, because we know that well over half of homeless folks in this county are inside the city of Seattle. And so what it'll do is generate a huge amount of money. And so the red line will not be an isolated incident throughout the county. And so that is my view on that issue. Doesn't mean we're heartless, doesn't mean we don't think that housing is an important part of the solution to homelessness. It certainly is. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't make significant and perhaps increased investments in that. We should, but we should not do it in an underhanded way that isn't in good partnership with our cities, mayors, city councils, and other special purpose districts. And it just means we need to be thoughtful about the underlying policy as well. Housing is important, but I've never seen a house, whether it's given, rented, loaned, or subsidized, that helps all that much if you've got somebody who's suffering from significant mental health challenges or hasn't yet been given the tools they need to succeed in dealing with their addiction. And so those issues need to be addressed. And right now, unfortunately, KCRHA is not really focusing in on those other issues of mental health and substance abuse, which are a very important part of the global solution to homelessness. Next slide. Just a little bit on substance use. What we're seeing is a double-digit increase in drug and alcohol as a result of this pandemic. Folks are at home, they're worried, perhaps they're unemployed, they don't know how they're going to pay their rent, perhaps they're facing the end of an eviction moratorium, and all of the systems that they may have used to stay sober or to avoid drugs and alcohol in the first place have been eroded away. And it is a problem, and we're creating a bow wave of problems we better get ahead of soon. I've been really charging hard to try and find a solution to this, including the framing the Harborview Bond Capital Improvement Program with a whole lot more robust behavioral health services, including building in a substantial treatment of substance use disorders, training facility, flexible increased bed space. Those are the things that we are working on. I'm working on a whole bunch of various substance abuse and alcohol related issues moving forward. So one of the problems also is that the mental illness drug dependency money that historically we've tapped into to help solve these problems is in trouble because our tax revenues are down. And you combine that with this double-digit increase, and it's really a perfect storm for those folks who are struggling with these areas and challenges in their lives. Okay, next slide. We talk a little bit about public safety. I think if you had to ask me what's concerning me the most besides COVID, I would say it's crime and general safety in our neighborhoods throughout King County. The shots fired report shows a dramatic increase in shots fired over our 3-year average, 36% rise in shooting victims. Homicides and murders have spiked 86% over the last 3 years, 86%. It's not good. In fact, crime is at the highest levels it's been since 1992. And so you're talking 30 years almost. And that's a problem. And it doesn't look like it's going down. Let me add to it some of the policy discussions right now. So we have almost completely decriminalized charges to minors throughout King County. If you're under 18 It's zero youth incarceration is the policy at King County, and it's a bad policy. The state is now changing the definition of minority to 19 years old and 364 days. So basically 20, 1 day short of 20. There's no consequences for illegal, sometimes viciously illegal action or activities in King County. That's a problem. We also know that recidivism is somewhere between 85 and 90% of people who commit crimes reoffend over a 6-year period. That is adding to the challenge. And then we have a systematic decriminalization in the adult category across the board. I don't see these crime numbers coming down anytime soon. And I think it will be right up there with homelessness as the top 2 local issues as the COVID challenge begins to wade, God willing, towards the end of the year. Next slide. Let me just talk a little bit about the bottleneck because of COVID on the Superior Court system. There's a huge backlog. Felonies are backlogged from an average of 3,250 cases. It's supposed to be 9,000 by the summer. Serious cases of homicide, rape, domestic violence, robbery, shootings have risen. Also, I would note the King County Sheriff's Office will no longer be an elected position by a vote of the people, Prop 5. That proposition, which would strip the sheriff of being elected, that failed pretty spectacularly in my council district. About 60% of the people voted against it, but it passed so overwhelmingly in Seattle that the future now is going to be a King County Council appointed sheriff. And also the King County Council will be the ones that will be setting criminal justice policy across the board. I'm the only person on that council with any criminal justice experience, a former federal prosecutor in 3 jurisdictions across the United States. And I'm telling you, I'm very worried about the direction that we are going to go with the recidivism and the revolving door of justice in mind. So that is the reality. We're going to deal with it. We're going to deal with it as best we can. It's just important that we have a sheriff that is going to be enforcing our laws and is active in what we call community policing, out there investing time and effort, energy, and relationships in the community, which is a model I think we've gotten away from some recently. Next slide, please. All right, we're at the point of questions, and let me have a little of my morning Diet Coke here, and then I'm happy to answer, entertain any questions, comments, criticism, concerns, thoughts, values, whatever you like, please.
Can I go?
Sure, Marvin.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much. I think you'll see a lot of us agree with all of your numbers and your and what you're stating. If we can just focus on the red line real quick, of course, well, not real quick, but the red line is symbolic of what's going to happen when it comes to the homelessness issue, specifically during COVID. And what we're seeing right now here in this city, at least with all of my neighbors that are here on the Zoom, is that we saw a Seattle problem, quote unquote, a Seattle problem, just being deposited at our doorstep with no resources, no word that it was coming, and it just arrived. And when we're talking about depositing, essentially the DESC, and for those not aware and those who've been there, and the council member knows that DESC is literally next door to the courthouse. But they moved it over here to Renton, but at least in Seattle, they are surrounded by the Chiefs Youth Club, the YW and YMCA, Pioneer House. All of these resources are surrounding DESC, so that way there's adequate support systems for essentially these very chronic homelessness and mental health cases that are there. They essentially ripped that out and deposited it right in the middle of our neighborhood, where there is almost nothing in order to support all these people in need. And right now we're considering all of these people that are at the DSC. We're considering them our new neighbors. So, and that's great and that's fine, but and we want to help them, and the common public public commentary thinks that we don't, but we do. But we just don't have it. I mean, I think we have $1.4 million left in, I think in this next coming fiscal year, about 1.4 million for human services, but none of that is going to go towards towards this. I don't think any of those dollars are going to be coming soon. And and even though we're going to have enough, even though we're having already an issue of police and fire, it's just that mental health response and those services response is just inadequate in order to support a DESC class size of essentially of a facility that just got dropped on our lap. How can we how can the county help the local community? Because we don't even have nonprofits that can that are designed to handle. All these nonprofits are going to have to come outside of our community just to help with the burden of servicing these essentially 250 residents just dropped out of nowhere.
Yeah. Oh, I think Marvin, I think you make very good points. It's interesting. Renton has always been sort of on the forefront of providing services to a homeless community anyway. It was always a little bit ahead of the game. And the Housing Authority, for example, is one of the best in the region. And so all of a sudden, the greater Seattle area was now asking Renton to take on yet even bigger share of responsibility for the homeless. First, it was just done as a way to quarantine and separate from the possibility of the pandemic, but increasingly it has morphed quite deliberately from protecting people from getting COVID to this is a model for future success.
Right. And it went from mission creep to all of a sudden now Renton is responsible. Yeah. And it's like great if you're gonna if you're using a football metaphor, if you're gonna toss us the ball, right. Then we're gonna need the resources to, like Seattle did. I mean, not to say that Seattle gobbled up resources, but a lot of effort went to just supporting just those 250 people. And I mean, we saw in November what a police and fire response looked like. The community just wasn't ready for it, and we weren't, and forget. I mean, take it out of the realm of our planning commission for an example. Again, the nonprofit communities aren't even tooled. It doesn't. The infrastructure doesn't exist, and so what can we do to help ship in people, like Valley Medical Center or other groups to say, hey, come to Renton, or better yet, does this mean that Renton gets carte blanche to make our own solution that's different from Seattle and hopefully to have, a Renton solution?
Yeah, well, I think you're right. First of all, I think local communities should be able to really choose what their solutions are. And the good news is Renton has a revenue stream to be able to do that. I don't think that other jurisdictions force a homeless population into a community, particularly when it's not done in proper consultation. City leaders have done everything they can within reason to try and be flexible, compassionate, and compromise. But this, the county executive side of things, remember, we're very different, right? The council, as you know, versus the executive, has gone too far. I mean, I just had a chairman of one of our committees, my colleague on the council, claimed that Renton is a success, a model for future. And that is utterly tone deaf, out of touch. And I would encourage that council member to come on down and take a look at, for example, the whatever 1,000% increase in crime. Take a look at what's happening in terms of damage to the facility, what's happening to the businesses surrounding it, and what's happening with the relationship between King County and the city of Renton. Causes me some concern. So it is we can do better. and Marvin, just to capture a couple points you said, wraparound services, right? So mental health. I mean, look at our homeless problem would look a lot different if we could solve, let's say we could solve 80% of the mental health challenges for those people and 80% of the drug addiction. I mean, I don't think those are unreasonable numbers, maybe 70, but certainly more than half. It would look very, very different. And you add then components like job training. If people are taking their medication for if it's treatable for mental health, if they are practicing sobriety, if they are engaged in job training, I'm all about, providing, help them with housing. Absolutely, man. Help them with every opportunity we possibly can. That's the deal. But if you're just putting somebody in a house or an apartment behind closed doors and they're just active in their addiction, or they're still suffering from whatever mental health challenge they have, we really haven't moved the ball far forward. If you look at Los Angeles, for example, those units they were scheduled to be around 400,000 per unit. They ballooned up to 600,000 per unit. They haven't made any market difference in their homeless problem. And so you can't just keep throwing money at housing. It is not the fix-all silver bullet solution that those in Seattle might suggest that it is.
Right. And I think you also hit the nail on the head. It started as just housing, just for a couple of months. When you move, anyone who's in the housing or nonprofit sector that deals with human services, that they know that that's not what happens, and mission creep comes in. And so, and again, I apologize. I'm not leaving this at your feet. I know where it's directed at, but of course, where we got to our local council member is, we need this is where the help is needed, to where we're going to need not the response, but it's we're going to need the county's help in order to where can we get those resources, not to attract, not businesses, but attract nonprofits to come help what's already here in the city. And I think the other thing that we will fear as a chamber, or as chamber members, is who's going to coordinate that response? Is it going to be our city that will do it? Is it going? Do we as members have to create a new nonprofit authority to handle those dollars? I mean, like, what is recommended from what you're seeing in order to make that okay? Because we want to help these people, but at the same time, it's like, when they find out that how successful we will be, more people will come. And so it's just a future that we're seeing, that we're concerned with.
Well, let me Marvin, that's good. Let me take that back to the Homeless Governance Authority. Now that Claudia has been appointed this year for that role, I will bring that back to her and suggest that maybe there's some guidance on how that looks. Obviously, your community, Rent, should be in the lead on it. But Cody, let's go back and talk to them and see if they have some suggestions on what they recommend for local communities who are interested in putting something like this together. One of the things that we have to look at is this pipeline in from outside of the community, particularly outside of the state. We do know that roughly 45% of folks who self-describe in our one-night count as homeless have not lived in the community, have been in the community only 4 years or less. And folks will say, oh, it's a homegrown problem. Well, some of it is, but a huge part of it isn't. And the numbers are dramatically underrepresented. How do we stop that pipeline into our community? If we're making it better and giving away all the housing, aren't we going to bring in people who will see the generosity of the taxpayers here? And that is something we need to struggle with. And it is not a popular issue to talk about. Nobody really wants to talk about, but I think we need to have that conversation because we might just actually be making things worse than better. Marvin, thanks for your comments, and let's stay in touch. And let me see if there's any other comments or questions from some of the other groups.
I'd like to say, just in my short time duration and experience with this, a lot of what Marvin said is very true. It's the infrastructure that's lacking with this on how to deal with this problem. And I know, the frustration for the RFA has been the classification of the building. The county wants to keep it as a hotel, which a hotel is required to meet different safety standards than a skilled nursing facility, which is technically what this building is because of what they're offering. I mean, you know, they had non-ambulatory people, which means they can't get out of the building themselves up on the 6th floor. Then you throw in the fact that both elevators at one point were broken. There's a lot of liability with this building, and our frustration is we want to keep everyone safe. We're not trying to push it out of the community, but we want to keep it safe. And so that's, if we could get pushed there to follow the direction from our fire marshal on how we classify this building so that we can have the proper safety measures in place to keep everyone there safe. And then even the response in, you know, there's a safety factor with that now that they're settling in and it's become their building and they consider it their property. And that's human nature, is we get kind of protective of that. But it's something we definitely need to be aware of and look at. And again, I think you're spot on. It's the mental wellness, the mental health that we really need to focus on. If we're going to put people out there, we need to give them the tools and the ability to be successful in living on their own and taking care of themselves.
That's good, Steve. Thanks. I appreciate your comments. I agree with you 100%. I agree with Marvin as well. And I look forward to continuing the dialogue, Steve. Always feel free to call me, or we can stay in touch or come down and
Absolutely.
as we drive through this problem. Because, you know, what's going to happen is slowly COVID-19, it'll still be with us probably forever, but we're going to get these vaccinations,
Right.
and we're going to figure out the booster shot. The immediate aftermath, the bow wave, economic bow wave is going to peter off. We're going to be dealing with homelessness and crime. Those are your local issues, I think, that we're really going to have to focus on. So those of us who are making policy need to be thinking forward in terms of being prepared for that. And
absolutely, because even the crime has a bigger impact on us. We're going to more of these calls and we're involved in those. So yes, public safety from that standpoint. And then also, as you pointed out initially, we need to already start preparing for the next pandemic. We need to be more ready than we were from the lessons learned on this and thinking forward. Yes, we have problems to deal with now, but we need to be better prepared or we're going to end up repeating history.
Yeah, I agree with you. And of course, fire is right in the middle of both those intersections of both those issues, as you well know.
Yes.
I mean, some of the good news is all doom and gloom. I mean, Renton is really, truly one of the best cities, best run cities I know of. It certainly has its challenges. You've got the King County Emergency Operations Center in Renton. You got Renton Technical College in Renton. You got, you've got Valley Medical Center right there. You've got some great partners. And I think, you know, we're gonna be okay, but we need to be able to attack this and have the freedom to attack it, and do it in ways that may not necessarily be popular in downtown Seattle or popular out in Enumclaw. I mean, we got to figure out ways that solve the problem. So the metric isn't, Steve, for example, let's say we're a nonprofit and we fed 500 homeless people this week, okay? And the week before was only 400, and the week before was only 300. Well, we're doing great, but that's not the metric for success. The metric for success is how many people are sleeping out on the street. That's where we got it. So it's not outputs, it's outcomes, right? And how are we going to measure and treat that as best we can? So
Absolutely.
Welcome. Look forward to working with you.
You as well.
You got a good team there.
Yes, I would agree 100%.
Thanks. Anyone else?
Councilmember Dunn, question for you. If the King County Regional Homeless, the KCRHA, if they hired the new CEO, Regina Cannon, and congratulations on that step. I know that was challenging with COVID especially. And the next steps are to hire 5 leadership positions, a staffing plan, develop a budget. Could it be worth merit to put pause on the potential shelters and approach that DESC and King County are taking right now, until such time as the KCRHA really has a regional plan of attack? I know Renton is being targeted, if you will, for pulling out of that sales tax approach, saying that we don't want to be a part of the regional solution. However, on the flip side, I then see King County almost taking similar steps of, we have a regional task force and we should be developing a regional plan. But in the meantime, our plan or our solution from Seattle that still doesn't have the success I would love to have seen is what we're going to impose into throughout the region. To me, King County spreading the wealth is not a regional approach, or at least not the regional approach I would like to see collaboration toward.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And the answer is, yeah, we should push pause until Regina gets in there and gets her team assembled and can drive forward some of this stuff. I think if we're going to do this regional approach, we're going to get all the parties involved and we're going to hire somebody. It doesn't make sense to start jamming on policies that one particular branch of one particular government wants to pursue. In this case, the executive branch of county government. It needs to be more holistic than that and moving it forward. So I agree that that's the right way we should approach it. And I've had situations in government where, for example, when I was at the Justice Department, and I was appointed by the president to run a president's national effort to fight gun violence. And a lot of times what the administration would do is they put in the deputy level, deputy secretary or deputy attorney general before they brought in the person that was going to be their boss, the assistant attorney general. And they put all those people in place, and then this person come in and expect to have to work with these people as their key deputies. And it just never made any sense. Bring in the principal, then bring in the deputies, and then implement the policy if you really want it to be seamless and something that has organizational buy-in from top to bottom. Oh, that's good. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, point taken. Marvin, it's good to see you again. If you want to get involved in any of these committees that we have in King County, let me know. We're always looking for. I've
disappeared. I've been busy for 3 years, so I'm happy for, as Diane will know, I'm itching to get back into the fight. So
good.
Cody, you'll be getting a call from me.
Good.
Councilmember Dunn, we have kept you beyond your the request that we made for appearance and presentation, and I truly appreciate the time that you have shared, the emphasis that you've put on our questions. I know the Red Lion may be out of your boundaries, but you certainly have not stopped advocating on behalf of Renton and our entire community, and it is sure is appreciated. You've always been willing to step up when called upon, and thank you for being that champion for Renton.
My pleasure.
Yes.
Thanks for having
Thank
me.
you, sir.
All right, gang. We'll stay in touch. See you soon.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Stay safe and healthy, everyone.